Welcome to the Flexile tutorial on filters. In this tutorial, we're going to be going over the basics of filters. I will have a part 2 and also a part 3 on some more advanced filters and how to use quick filters. But for the moment, we're going to stick with the basic stuff. I'm going to explain how to use filters to filter out the fields or the records you don't want to see by searching on fields for the records you do want to see. Before we start though, we need to know where filters are. As you can see right now, you are looking at a record list. This is all of my contacts. And I can access filters by pulling down on the grab handle here, or if I'm at the top of the list, as I am here, I can just pull down on the table. As you can see, I pulled down some additional options, including filter, sort, and I can actually change my page. We don't care about that for the moment. Instead, we want to focus on filters. I can tap on it to select other filters that I have previously saved, including friends, family, and work. Quick filter, I'll go over that in another tutorial. You can't edit it or delete it or mess with it except through a very specific way. It's something I'll explain in another. So moving on. The friends, family, and work and all are filters that I have previously created, and so I can tap on friends and just see that this record is only displaying contacts with the category of friends. Change that back to all, and you'll notice that I have a category called acquaintances, and because of that, I want to add a filter for my acquaintances. Now, next to that selection, you notice, or you should notice, a dot, dot, dot button right here. This will allow me to edit by tapping on a filter. I can change the name, or I can edit the actual filter itself by tapping on that, well, here, the little chevron button. I can go back. I can rearrange by tapping and holding, and then I can also add a new one. Now, there's another place you can actually access these. I'm going to show you that real quick. You can go back to the table itself, view its options, and see that down here, under Save Filters, I get the same ability to add, edit, and manage my filters. I don't really recommend that you do it from here, though. The reason is usually you want to see what effect your filters are having on your records, and it's a lot easier to do that if you're editing it directly from the record list itself. We're going to start by adding a new filter called Acquaintances, assuming that I can remember how to spell it. I think that looks right. I hope that's right. It might have been an E. Well, we'll stick with that one. Okay, now that I've added a new filter, I get the option to add fields to it. Now, I would like to point out that if you don't add any fields and you just save this filter, you'll get a little warning that says you haven't added any fields, but you can still save it. And if you do, this filter will display all records. In fact, my all records here is exactly that. It's an empty filter. And so if you want a specific filter that displays all your records, just don't add any fields to it. In this case, we want to add a field. Now, I'm going to tap on that plus button, and you're going to see that there are two options here. I can add a new field, or I can add an existing filter, a previous filter that I have created, one of the other ones. I'm not going to be going over that. I'll need to explain some more advanced stuff to you before we do that. So that will be in the next tutorial. For now, we're going to add a new field by tapping on it. And it gives me a list of all the fields that I can choose to search by. And you may, in some cases, notice that you have fields missing. You cannot search by an image. While that may be really, really cool, I have no idea how to program that yet. So you can't do it. Until then, you have lots of options to search by, including two fields that you did not add, created and modified date. Those are fields that Flexile automatically has keeps up to date for you. In this case, we're going to tap on create category, and it adds that field to the filter. Now, at the moment, the field's not set to anything. And if I were to save that, in fact, let's close out of this, select acquaintances. You notice that it's not really doing anything. You need to add a value here. Now, if I change that to is and save it, I'm going to get nothing. And it's a very specific nothing. It is a nothing that, let's see if I can show you. I add a new record. That record shows up. And what you're searching for by searching for nothing is category that has no value in it. And it's a very specific, if you know computer lingo, it's null value or nil value if you use Objective-C. If you don't know what that means, that is perfectly fine. What you need to know is that if you don't have a value in it, it's searching for records that have no value. And that only works for the is not, and their equivalents in the numeric values. I will go over those in just a minute. For now, we are going to add ACQ. Okay, and we're going to start with has. Once I've entered a value, you'll notice that I get an additional option, and that's for record default. I will explain that in just a minute, but for the moment, we're going to ignore it. The options that you have here, I'd like to mention you can't change the field. If you want to change the field, delete it and then add a new one. Let's go over the options here. You will have two sets of options or none at all, depending on what field you're searching on. If the field is a text field, you'll have all of the options you see currently: has not, is not, prefix, and suffix. If it is a numeric field, like if it's a number or if it's a date, instead of having these options, you will have equal to, less than, greater than, not equal to in order to perform your search. I'll explain those in just a minute. In a few cases, in some cases, you won't have any option at all, and that is the picker list, for example. Because it has a very set number of values, it's always going to equal exactly that value, and it's going to search for it. I hope that makes sense. We're going to start with the text values. I have put in the text search of ACQ. Now, has, what that's going to do is going to search all the records in the category field, and it's going to check to see if those records have the values ACQ. So if I save this, you should notice, if I minimize that here for a second, that Jonathan and Peter are showing up because they are acquaintances. In acquaintances, that category has ACQ in it. If I go back in here and I say has not ACQ, and I save it, every other category shows up because those records do not have ACQ in the category value. To give you an idea of how that might work, if I just do A, I only get friends and work because those category values do not have an A in them. If I did has, I would get the opposite of those. Family is also showing up because it has an A, and acquaintances has an A, and so those two categories are showing up. I hope that clearly demonstrate what has and has not. Those basically means it's matching on those values anywhere in the record value. Is different. Not a, oh, I just dropped my iPad. That was fun. Okay, not a single value, not a single record has a category that is A. They may have A in them, but they are not A, and that's important to note. So if I wanted this to work, I could actually just type in acquaintances. And now it's displaying acquaintances because the value is acquaintances. And is not works the same way, but I should point out if I added a space in here, even though it looks like it's the same value, it's not, and so it doesn't match up. Spaces count. Please be aware of that. If you're having some trouble getting something to match, you may take a look at, well, your spelling, particularly if it's a long word like acquaintances, but also check for spaces because spaces can kind of mess you up sometimes. And if you match it up exactly, you can see it works. Is not, I think you probably are starting to get the gist of how that works. Tap on that, and I get everything that is not acquaintances, by the way, including null values, because null values is not acquaintances. There's two other options, prefix and suffix. The prefix means it starts with the letters, the letters that you have put in there. It can also include up to the entire word. So if I did prefix, it works. If I do suffix, it works because it ends with the entire word. But if I were to do suffix and remove this A, it wouldn't still work because it's matching off of the end of the characters. However, if I did prefix now, prefix would not work. I get nothing because it doesn't begin with CQ in the rest of the word. It has an A in front of it. And so this gives you a lot of flexibility in, actually just leave that alone, gives you a lot of flexibility in how you perform the search on each of the fields. Now, there are numeric values, so I'm going to add a new field here and use created date. I'm not going to demonstrate it, just show you what the values are. You have equal to, and so if the field is a numeric based field like dates are, in this case it would have to be exactly December 3rd, 2013 at 10:53 and 23 seconds in order for the record to show up. Just be aware. You can do less than, greater than, or similar to is not equal to. So any record that is not equal to that exact value will show up. And we're going to remove that. I will explain multiple fields in just a second, but let's finish this out first. Now there's one special situation here, and that is references. You may notice over here that I've got a link icon, and if you're used to Flexile, if you've used it a little bit, you probably know that you can tap on it. And you will get a list of all of the links that all the records you can link to. Conveniently enough, tap on it, and I didn't have to actually learn how to spell acquaintances. It was already there. It fills in the value, and behind the scenes, and this is important, behind the scenes, when you select a reference, it does keep track of the record ID of the record that you actually linked to. And that's important because now we're going to talk about the record default. If I tap on that, what that does is it means any new record that I add to the table, while this filter is selected, is going to automatically use acquaintances as its default value. Now, because this is a reference, this isn't something that I can change in the actual record itself. This would only work if I tapped and selected a record. And in this case, under the reference, it's going to add a link so that the default is acquaintances. It will not, however, fill in that value if you don't select a link. That's really important to emphasize. If you want the default record defaults for references, you have to select a link. Now, in every other field type, you know, you don't need to, you can just select, you can just enter a value. If it's a regular text field, just enter a value, so on and so forth. And if that value can be applied, there are some field types that that's not going to work for. For example, a concatenated field, which is a field that is joining text from other fields. That won't work because it's a calculated value. But in this case, for references, you need to select the actual record. And most other field types, text fields, number fields, pickers, so on and so forth, you can, whatever value you put in there is going to be the default value so long as you select that checkbox there. All right, now let's save this. And I'm now showing only the acquaintances category. If I add a new field or a new record, I'm sorry, you can see here acquaintances was already added as a default, and the link here was automatically inserted. This is very, very, very convenient. It's very, when someone actually, I recommended that I do this, and I just hit my head. I was like, wow, why didn't I think of this before? Because it has made filters so useful, because I can change the default values of new records by simply changing the filter. We want to delete that. Now let's talk about multiple fields. Default. Okay, now you can change this, but in the default, if I add a new field, let's do full name. Additional values, additional fields that I add work kind of as an AND operator or operand. What that means is the value for each field has to match. All of the fields have to match in order for the record to show up. So for example, I have full name here, and I want to add Peter. There we go. All right. And I now have added a new filter or new field to the acquaintances filter that searches for Peter on full name. Now, what's going to happen is Flexile is going to make sure that the records that show up matches both of these values. So if I save this, I only get one record, and that's because only one record, Matt, has a category of acquaintances, and it has Peter in the full name. Right? I hope that makes sense. The and. You can make that an or. That is an option that I will be going over in the advanced tutorial. But for now, the default is that additional fields refine your search. They don't expand it, they refine it. They make it smaller. They allow you to weed out more records by adding more filters and more fields. And you need to be aware of that, because let's say I added another field for full name and I typed in something else, Jones or John. Okay, this will never, well, actually could, if the person, that could work. Let's say I just did is. All right. This will never match anything ever, because it requires that a full name be Peter completely and be John completely. And you can't do that. So because of that, this will never show up as anything. Someday I'd like to write code that actually analyzes your filters and says, hey, by the way, this isn't going to pull anything up. But for now, just know, look at your records. This is an and situation here, so that won't work. It might actually work if I used has, because it would look and see, does the full name have Peter and John in it? So if I had somebody named Peter John or John Peter, that might actually work as long as they were in acquaintances. But Just need to understand the and part, that it's narrowing down the filter. And again, if I were to select record default, I could save this. And now it doesn't work because full name is a concatenated field, which doesn't allow it to have those values. I really should fix that. I think I will fix that in a new release so that it doesn't even give you the option here. I could do first name has Peter. Oh, oops. Save that. So now that I've set up the first name, again, it's still fooling it up because the first name has Peter in it. Peter shows up. Okay. And it also shows up in the concatenated value as well. I do not want that in there. And I don't want that as a default. Actually, I don't want that at all. So we're going to remove that. Okay. I hope category is. Let's remove these. Okay. All right, there we go. Had to clean out some of those extra records I put in there. Now you can see I've created a filter. It's a very simple one. It only has one field in it, but I could add more fields if I wanted to further refine. Again, I will be going over some of the more advanced stuff later in another tutorial. I thank you for taking the time to watch this. Before we go, I'd like to point out that filters can be attached to actual views. So you can see that I've created additional views, and for example, in the friends view, I'm now only viewing my friends, and I've changed the actual look of the records as well. A very powerful aspect of features is that they can be attached to views, but I'll be explaining how to do that in the views tutorial, not here. So I just wanted to point it out because it allows you to change your filter, your sort, your record defaults because you're changing your filter, and how your records actually look, all by changing one single view. It's kind of cool, kind of fun, kind of neat. All right, that concludes this tutorial. I will be going over some of the more advanced stuff later on. I hope this has been informative, and I thank you for taking the time to watch. Have a wonderful day.